all about writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything in the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 18, part 3 on our series of The Business of Writing. I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who is an award-winning author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter.
And I'm Sara, here with my co-host Ben, who is an award-winning best-selling author and ghostwriter, editor, and publisher. And we are here today with our special guest, Michelle Robinson.
Hi, guys. Thank
Hi,
you,
Michelle.
Ben. Thank you, Sara.
I'm going to jump in right away and just say how awesome you are. So, for everyone listening, Michelle and I have worked together for about 10 years now. We actually met when Michelle was in her last year of her degree in publishing and had to do an intern at a local publishing house. So I took her on. And amongst her many, many amazing qualities, Michelle proved that she has the ability to do anything. I mean, take this, for example. You've got this editing student, right, who's all into editing. And on one of her first days, I said, yeah, we're organizing a public relations event for one of our authors. I need you to cold call this list of people in Vancouver and get them to sign up and give us money and come to our event. Can you do that? And this editing student went, sure, and picked up the phone and started calling. That's when I knew that Michelle was gold. And we've worked together at both the publishing company and also at Cascadia Author Services for many years. And Michelle is my go-to editor with any of my own projects, and anyone who needs an editor, I send them to Michelle. So she is an amazing expert on all things editing, and we're really happy to have you here today.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Ben. I know most of you can't see me, but I am blushing a little bit, so thank you.
Everyone on
Lovely
YouTube
introduction.
Everyone on YouTube will see it. Don't worry.
Now you tell me.
I'm excited about this because, for me, as a fiction and nonfiction writer, editing is both an objective and a subjective thing. And I'm really excited for the readers to hear from someone who just loves to do it, because so many people love to write, but they don't love to edit, or it's a totally different knack. So I'm really excited to hear everything that you're going to share with us. And I know our readers, our listeners, there's my Freud, our listeners are going to enjoy it too.
Yeah. So, Michelle, if you're happy, we'll just dive right in here.
Certainly.
We're thinking a lot about our listeners who have never worked with an editor before. So maybe they've written their manuscript or in the process of writing a manuscript, and they're thinking about editing and don't really know what to do next. And so as the friendly face of professional editors everywhere, the first question I want to put to you is this, is in your experience, do you sense a lot of trepidation from first-time authors when it comes time to hand over their work to you?
Oh, yes, definitely. And completely understandably as well, too. I mean, for especially first-time authors, they've been working on this project for ages. It might be a story that they've held really close to their heart, or it might be a memoir that's explaining some really difficult times in their life. And to be able to reach out and share this with a stranger, I mean, that takes a lot of bravery. And you want to be able to be comfortable doing so and feel that, yes, it's right. So yes, I've definitely seen that from authors all over, whether it's first time or even ones who have done it for the fifth time.
Yeah. And how do you deal with it as an editor when you come up against that?
I usually like to open up communication with the author first, kind of get to know them, because if I'm less of a stranger, then it's easier to say, hey, now I'm ready to share my work. And I would say the first step really is touching base with that author and making sure, you are comfortable with the book as it's been written. You don't have any other major plans for it, no rewritings of chapter 3 or what have you. Yeah. And ideally that somebody else has seen it before, that they've been able to get their toes wet, so to speak, with sharing it with somebody else who is a bit of a safer person than this big professional stranger behind the screen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We were wondering about that with, if someone's finished their manuscript and they're thinking about maybe giving it to what you might call an informal editor, like family, friends, beta readers, that sort of thing. Do you think that's a useful first step to go through that stage before they bring it to you as the professional?
Definitely, yeah. Part of that is being comfortable with it. Part of it is also to get that morale boost, because as you say, if you can give it to a family friend and they can be like, oh, yeah, it's great, that helps you take that next step of sending it out, maybe to beta readers, somebody who is your target audience. If you're trying to reach out to fantasy lovers, then you want to find fantasy readers or other fantasy writers, maybe, to share the book with first and get
Mhm.
kind of that informal feedback and get used to that process.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know that some people are quite comfortable giving their book to friends and family and beta readers. Um, so what's the difference? Like some people might think, oh, I don't need to get an editor because, my aunt read it and she's an English teacher and she says it's great. So what's the difference between a family friend's beta reader and a professional editor? Like why should they then take it to the next step?
Yeah, great question. So, an editor is somebody who is steeped in the industry. So, even if your aunt is a librarian or an English teacher or what have you, they're not necessarily in the book industry. They're not reading hundreds, thousands of these new manuscripts and knowing what's current, knowing what works, what might not. And they're not necessarily trained to see those connections between things. So, an example, for instance, in a story is you can have a lot of great, exciting new ideas or great characters, plot points. An editor can help you see those pieces and take them, put them together all at once. So that it's something cohesive. They are merging your story with your tone, with your character development, and making it feel like a more cohesive whole. That's what they're trained to do.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I guess like anything else, editing is a profession, and the more you
Exactly.
do it, the more trained at it, the better you'll be. So yeah, that's fair.
Well,
Um, yeah, go ahead, sir.
can I ask though, I mean, so you're talking, all the different kind of parts of editing, right? And, if, it, and we know we've talked a little bit about how there's all different kinds of editors. There are developmental
Oh, excellent.
structure
Yes.
editors and stuff. So, I mean, do you have a recommendation on when you would say, now is when you should really think about sending your book out to a professional editor when it needs developmental work or structural work? And also, especially for first time writers, they might not even know when they need these things. Are there any way that
Mhm.
people can say, if you feel stuck, or if you feel something's not right, or nope, just automatically go straight to the structural editor first, no matter what, or the developmental or whatever, like what stage and how do they know it's that stage, if you have anything to give them for that?
Yeah, so great, Sarah. I think you've got kind of two questions built in there as to whether or not if an author is stuck, if they feel like whether they're ready to go, or when they are, what kind of editor they're reaching out to. I have been assuming more of a developmental edit because that's usually your first step when you are feeling comfortable and confident. I do find now there's a lot of variation, but this tends to happen around the third complete draft. Now, emphasis on complete. The book has existed in three different, completely different forms, not just, oh, you've edited the first chapter, 3 or 4 times. But yeah, you reach this point of comfortability where you've created the first draft, you've sat on it for a while, you've revised it, maybe you've sent it out to other people, they've given their feedback kind of informally, you've revised it again. Some authors are comfortable at that stage to reach out to the professional. And yes, you do usually want to be starting with the big picture things like a structural, also sometimes called a developmental edit. However, if you are feeling stuck and if you're unsure, there's also answers for that too. Not all editors do, but many offer kind of more book coaching services. So you might see it as book coach or a consultation or even a manuscript evaluation where you've got that professional editor who's reading through for you and can provide you with that feedback of where you are along in your development, whether or not they think that you're ready for an edit, or whether or not they think that maybe you should bounce it around a little bit longer. Or even if you're at that stage where you're like 3/4 of the way through and you just can't nail that ending and you're stuck and you want to be able to move forward, a book coach or a manuscript evaluation can help you take that next step.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that helps a lot of people who are just like, I don't know if I need an editor or when I need an editor or what kind of an editor. And I think, is it true that there's been a lot of changes in the industry about it's not just an editor, like you were describing some of those other services, ones I've never even heard of, with manuscript coaching and all of that, there seems to be like a lot of tiers of options for authors as well along the way.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, modern day has been great for that with online services and being able to connect with so many different people. I think the self-publishing industry has also helped move that forward as well. Because in the traditional world, yes, you had those strict levels of editing, but that was always after a traditional publisher has already seen it, often after your book has been developed by an agent as well. And if you're self-publishing, you don't have that agent who's there providing that advice. So in some ways, editors have stepped up and have started offering those kinds of services.
That's cool. Can
I just jump in for a sec there? Sarah, you asked about tiers of editing, and you meant levels of editing. I realize now. But you're talking about tiers for the authors. I'm like, yep, there are a lot of tiers.
Yes,
there are a lot of tiers in this process. Yeah. There can be a problem of trying to give up your baby. That could be a real problem handing over to an editor, or just stop tinkering. I'm just not quite ready, not quite ready, not quite ready, not quite ready. And I'm sure it's a challenge for you as an editor to sometimes convince people to just let me take a look at it.
Yeah.
Hurt.
It is important not to revise something into the ground because sometimes, you see authors tying themselves in knots over this. And with this kind of uncertainty, sometimes you just need that professional to be able to say, no, what you have here is great. Here's how we can tie it together with something else or another character, whatever, and make it even better.
So at what point, like you as an editor, you're, when people are hesitating or when they're about to hand it over to you, do you usually see manuscripts come to you at a certain level? I'm using the word level again, but at a certain place where the work is always kind of the same, where everybody needs developmental work, or are you seeing manuscripts where you're like, wow, I just need to fix the missing periods? Or is it usually a lot of heavy lifting? And should authors be prepared for that when they are starting to work with you? Like they're going to hand something over and they're going to just be ready because no matter what, when manuscripts come, they just need that work, period.
Yeah, great question. I would say definitely the latter there, because even if you've got something that's really well defined, let's say you've got like a great writing group and you've bounced the story along quite a bit, or maybe you've got something closer to like a self-help book, but you already have your target audience. You've got those great beta readers and they're saying, yes, this has been really helpful. Even an editor will be able to take those next steps with the developmental edit and further refine it. That can be something like making ideal chapter lengths. It can be taking more complex ideas and simplifying them for your audience. Or it can be in the fiction world, refining your plot so that only those absolutely necessary steps are there. So I think there's always room for improvement with the developmental edit. This has been proven for generations with the traditional publishing world, where if you get picked up by a traditional publisher, they will send you through a full editorial process. I mean, even J.K. Rowling, Stephen King, doesn't matter what kind of big name, they have an editorial process for their books. You just need that professional third party to be able to look at the manuscript.
And it is a party.
Yeah.
It's not 20, it's like 5.
Yes, they say it takes a village, and that applies to books as well as children.
Yeah. I can offer a great example of this. When I signed my first book with New York, the book had already been professionally edited and it had gone a long way, and I was quite happy with it, and it had a lot of good feedback. But now it had been picked up by this New York house, and they had their own stamp they were going to put on it. And the big thing that he changed was basically cutting all of my chapters in half, like making each chapter half as long as it was. So what was just chapter 1 is now chapter 1 and 2. What was chapter 2 is now chapter 3 and 4, making the chapters shorter. And I remember I was really irked as an author at this because I made those chapters the way I wanted to make those chapters. But my editor explained to me it's about pacing. You want to keep the reader engaged. You want to get them to the end of this relatively short chapter and then immediately turn to the next one and start going. And I remember not being happy at all about this, but he was right. Of course he was right. He was right. The book is better. The book is much faster. The book reads better because of it. And I was fairly experienced at that point, but it's something I'd never come across. And nowadays, my general rule for writing is to try and keep the chapters down to a certain size, to try and match pretty much what my first New York editor told me to do. So, it doesn't matter where you're coming from as an author. I think there's always something new to learn, and a good professional editor can really bring that perspective, that experience, and just say, what you've got is great, but we're going to make it awesome. And I think that right there sums it up.
Yep. And I think too, Michelle, would you say that not only it's necessary to hand over your book at some point to a professional editor, but do you think that it's smart to think of the editing process as an ongoing thing? So let's say someone works with you, you are the first person outside of their friends and family that gets their manuscript, right? When you're done with it, do you think is it the feeling kind of like, there, it's done, we've worked together, we've gotten the book to where I feel it's good, and then do you say, now take it to the next kind of editor, or is it usually now it can go into the world and start trying to find agents? What is the expectation once the book's been handed over to an editor? Because I know a lot of people would be like, there, I gave it to a professional editor, I got it back, I made the tweaks, now it's ready to go. Is that really the case? Can it be sometimes? Is it never? I mean, what's the expectation after the first handoff?
Yeah, great question. I think that kind of depends on what your intentions are for the book and what you want to do with it. So you use the example of trying to find agents. After handing it to an editor for developmental, I hand it back. I mean, ideally, the author's applying their own changes. Maybe it's inspired something in them and they're able to take what I've suggested and run with it. If you're looking for an agent and you've got some very solid stylistic writing already, quite often you can seek out an agent just with that. Because again, as we talked about earlier, that agent is also going to have a hand in revising. And your publisher is also going to have a hand in revising. So unless you're feeling uncomfortable with the stylistic, the tone of voice, things like that in your writing, usually with that first step, you're ready to start approaching agents and look for that next step of the developmental process. If you're looking to self-publish, though, you don't have that next step of the developmental process. So you'll probably be looking for that next step of the editing process and looking for that next editor.
Which would be probably...
That would be it's commonly called a stylistic or line edit, because you're looking at the elements of style in a book, and you usually have to look pretty much line by line or sentence by sentence to see how well the dialogue flows, the descriptions, are your instructions clear in a how-to book, or in a memoir, are you evoking the correct emotions and responses in your reader? Smaller things than the big picture development.
Thank you. That's great. I think that's those are the expectations that I don't think are usually lined out, that it's, not just a one and done all the time. And even if you're done with the editor, then the agent will kind of step in as the next step of the editor. And I mean, I'm going through that right now where my agent's like, it's still not ready to go to big, to publishing houses. Like, this is, change it again. and it's a new genre for me, so fair point. But it's just, you don't realize your agent is actually acting as your kind of your developmental editor until you've gone through the process. Oh, Ben is getting called by his editor. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, it's J.K. Rowling. She keeps calling me.
JK,
yeah.
tell her to knock it up. Not gonna do it.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I love you, Miss Rowling. I love your work. I'm fully respectful. Yeah.
You wish, right? Don't we all wish that we would be getting calls from those kinds of authors? Like, I would like to collaborate on my next book with you. I have the perfect editor.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, yeah. Take a drink of wine.
I'm good. I'm good.
We're dinging all over the place today. So I don't have any more questions on the handing over book unless you do, Ben.
No, I think that's great. It's editing is such a huge topic, but just this first, when to hand it over. It's that really important question that every author needs to face. I think we've put it really well. Thank you, Michelle, for your insights today.
Yeah, I would say definitely getting that feeling of comfort level with one's book. It's a tricky thing.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your insight and for your, actual physical knowledge of that space of the industry. I know our listeners are going to appreciate it. I know I learned a little bit too, so thank you. And then that's our show for today, everybody. Please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our chats. Feel free to leave a review, which really does help us. I don't know, Michelle, if there's a place where people can find you, if you have an Instagram or a website for your editing services or anything like that we can send them to.
Oh, certainly. I mean, like any good millennial, I am online. You can usually find me easiest from my website, yournovelexperience.com.
Good. So please check Michelle out there. And don't forget, you can find Ben also at bennettrcoles.com as well as on Facebook.
And you can catch up with Sara at saradahman.com and on Instagram. Thanks for joining us today. Please reach out if there are any other topics that you'd like us to cover, and we'll see you again when we next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.